The restaurant shimmered like a jewel box turned inside out, every surface catching and multiplying the glow of Christmas lights. Gold garlands framed the tall mirrors, red ribbons curled around polished columns, and somewhere above it all, soft carols drifted from hidden speakers, wrapping the room in manufactured warmth. The air smelled of roasted meat, cinnamon, and expensive perfume. Laughter rose and fell in waves, punctuated by the clink of glasses and the delighted squeals of children allowed to stay up past their usual bedtime. At the far end of the room, beside a floor-to-ceiling window dusted with frost, sat Eleanor Whitmore. Her table was set with ceremonial care, starched white linen, silverware aligned with military precision, 2 wine glasses catching the light. 2 chairs stood opposite each other. One was occupied, the other remained empty, its folded napkin untouched, as if waiting for someone who was late but still expected. Eleanor noticed it every time her gaze lifted from the window, and each time, the sight landed with the same dull ache. She sat very straight, spine rigid despite the years pressing down on her shoulders, her gloved hands folded atop the head of her cane. Her silver hair was styled immaculately, her dark coat cut from fabric so fine it whispered when she moved. Anyone glancing her way would see an elegant elderly woman enjoying a quiet Christmas dinner. Few would guess how loud the silence inside her was. Outside, snow drifted lazily down, softening the edges of the city. Cars crawled along the street below, headlights glowing like fireflies. Couples hurried past arm in arm, scarves brushing cheeks, breath puffing white as they laughed about something unimportant and precious. Eleanor followed them with her eyes until they disappeared, swallowed by the night. She hadn't planned to come here. Not at first. Her driver had waited downstairs in the car, engine running, radio murmuring holiday news. He would have taken her anywhere, back to the penthouse overlooking the river, to the opera house hosting a private gala, to one of the many homes that technically belonged to her but no longer felt like they belonged to anyone at all. But this restaurant had pulled at her, quietly, insistently. Years ago, another lifetime, it felt like, Henry had brought her here on Christmas Eve because she'd complained about crowds and noise. "Trust me," he'd said, eyes bright, already sick though she hadn't known it yet. "You'll like it. It feels kind. The word had stayed with her long after he was gone. The waiter passed by, offering wine, but Eleanor shook her head. She didn't trust her hands tonight. Didn't trust the way emotions crept up on her when she least expected them, sudden and sharp as winter air in her lungs. She returned her gaze to the window, to the slow, patient fall of snow, and tried to steady her breathing. She had been many things in her life, decisive, formidable, even ruthless when necessary. She had built an empire with clear eyes and unshaking resolve. But Christmas Eve had a way of peeling her open, exposing the places she'd never learned how to fortify. A young waitress moved quickly through the room, balancing plates with practiced ease. Clara had been on her feet since early morning, covering shifts for coworkers who wanted the night off. She told herself she didn't mind. Overtime meant extra money, and extra money meant presents that didn't come from the discount shelf. Still, exhaustion tugged at her shoulders, and she longed for the moment she could finally sit down. As she wove between tables, her eyes caught on Eleanor. Not because of the expensive coat or the impeccable posture, though those stood out, but because of the stillness. Everyone else leaned forward, gestured, laughed. Eleanor seemed carved from marble, unmoving except for the slight turn of her head as she watched the world outside. Clara slowed without meaning to. There was something achingly familiar about that posture, about the way loneliness could sit so neatly inside elegance. She adjusted her apron and approached the table, softening her voice the way she always did when she sensed fragility. "Good evening, ma'am," she said. "Can I get you something warm to drink?" Eleanor looked up, startled, as if pulled from a deep place. Her eyes were a pale, piercing blue, sharp even now, but tired around the edges. She studied Clara for a moment, as though weighing whether the question was genuine. "Tea," she said at last. "Plain. No lemon." Clara smiled. Of course. As she turned to go, she felt a small tug at her hand. Her daughter, Lily, had been waiting near the service station with her coloring book, legs swinging impatiently. Clara had nowhere else to put her tonight, childcare cost money she didn't have, and the manager had reluctantly agreed to let Lily stay in the back as long as she behaved. Lily, however, had other ideas. "Mama," she whispered, eyes wide and fixed on Eleanor. "That lady looks sad." Clara flushed, glancing back in alarm. "Lily, sweetheart, we don't." But Eleanor had heard. Her lips curved, just barely, in a smile that surprised even her. It felt strange, like using a muscle she'd forgotten existed. "She's not wrong," Eleanor said quietly. Lily tilted her head, considering this, then slipped her hand free. Before Clara could react, the child padded across the floor, her sneakers lighting up with each step, and climbed into the empty chair at Eleanor's table as if it had always been meant for her. The room seemed to pause. Clara's breath caught painfully in her chest as she hurried forward, apologies tumbling to her lips. I'm so sorry, ma'am, she doesn't understand. Eleanor raised a gloved hand, gentle but unmistakably firm. Please, she said. It's all right. Lily beamed, utterly unbothered by adult panic, and swung her legs beneath the table. Eleanor looked at the child, really looked at her, the flushed cheeks, the too big sweater, the unguarded curiosity, and felt something shift deep inside her chest, a warmth she hadn't invited but couldn't deny. For the first time that evening, the empty chair was no longer accusing. It was occupied, and the silence, though still present, no longer felt quite so loud. I'm Lily, the little girl announced, swinging her legs as if she had claimed the chair by right rather than impulse. Her voice was bright, confident, the kind of confidence that comes from not yet knowing all the reasons one might hesitate. You shouldn't be alone on Christmas. The words landed softly, yet with surprising weight. For a heartbeat, Eleanor could only stare at her. No one had spoken to her so plainly in years. People usually wrapped their sentences around her like silk, careful, flattering, cautious. This child had simply named the truth and set it between them like an open gift. Clara arrived at the table in a rush, cheeks flushed, eyes wide with mortification. I'm so sorry, she said, her voice trembling as she reached for Lily's arm. She didn't mean to interrupt. Lily, come back here right now. Eleanor lifted her hand again, slower this time. Please, she said gently. Let her stay. Clara hesitated, caught between her instincts as a mother and the invisible rules of a place that valued order and appearances. She searched Eleanor's face for annoyance, for judgment, for anything that would tell her this was a mistake. Instead, she found a calm curiosity, and something softer, almost hopeful. If you're sure, Clara said quietly. I am. Lily leaned forward, elbows on the table, studying Eleanor's face as if committing it to memory. My mama says Christmas is for sharing, she said. Even if you don't have much. Especially then. Eleanor let out a breath that trembled more than she would have liked. Your mother sounds wise. She is, Lily replied proudly. She works a lot, but she smiles anyway. Clara swallowed hard at that and busied herself with straightening the table setting, hands suddenly unsure. Eleanor watched her with interest, the tired slump of her shoulders, the way she still tried to stand straight, as if refusing to let the world see how heavy things were. The tea arrived, steam curling upward. Eleanor wrapped her hands around the cup, grateful for the warmth. Lily's gaze followed the motion, then dropped to the untouched place setting across from Eleanor. Was someone supposed to sit there? Lily asked. Yes, Eleanor said before she could stop herself. The truth slipped out easily tonight. A long time ago. Lily nodded as if this made perfect sense. People can be late, she said. Or they can be gone. But chairs don't like being empty. Eleanor's throat tightened. She glanced at the chair, then back at the child. No, she murmured. I suppose they don't. Clara hovered nearby, unsure whether to leave or stay. Eleanor sensed it and turned to her. Would you join us? She asked. At least for a moment. I couldn't, Clara said automatically. I'm working. So was I, Eleanor replied with a faint smile. Once. Something in her tone, quiet, unassuming, made Clara pause. Slowly, she pulled another chair over and sat, perching on the edge as if ready to spring up at any second. Lily grinned. See, now it's a proper table. They ordered something simple to share, soup and bread, later a small dessert Lily insisted on choosing because it had the most sprinkles. Eleanor watched the child eat with unfiltered delight, crumbs dusting her sweater, and found herself smiling without effort. Conversation came easily, in small pieces. Lily talked about school, about how she wanted a bike but would be happy with markers if Santa decided bikes were too busy. Clara spoke about working double shifts, about trying to stretch December paychecks, about how this restaurant was nicer than most and how she was grateful even on nights like this. Eleanor listened, really listened. She asked questions and didn't interrupt. She didn't mention her companies, her wealth, the buildings that bore her name. Tonight, those things felt strangely irrelevant. At one point, Lily slid her coloring book across the table. Do you want to color with me? She asked. Red is the happiest color. Eleanor hesitated, then removed her gloves. Her hands were thin, veined, marked by age. She took the crayon and filled in a star with careful strokes. The wax left uneven lines, imperfect and human. I used to draw with my husband, she said quietly. When we were young. What happened? Lily asked, not unkindly. He died, Eleanor said simply. Lily considered this, then reached out and patted Eleanor's hand. I'm sorry, she said. But I think he'd be glad you're here. The simplicity of it cracked something open. Eleanor blinked, then laughed softly, a sound that surprised her as much as it did Clara. Outside, the snow fell thicker now, blurring the city lights into something softer, gentler. Time passed unnoticed, measured only by empty plates and cooling tea. When it was finally time to go, Clara stood, regret in her eyes. Thank you, she said. For being kind. Eleanor reached into her purse and set a card on the table, black and understated. Dinner is on me, she said. And if you ever need anything. Clara shook her head quickly. That's not necessary. Eleanor smiled. Perhaps not tonight. Lily hopped down from her chair and wrapped her arms around Eleanor without asking permission. The hug was fierce and warm and entirely unexpected. Merry Christmas, Lily said. You're not alone anymore. Eleanor closed her eyes, just for a moment, and returned the embrace. When they left, the chair across from her was empty again, but it no longer felt accusing. It felt full of promise.